The good, the bad, and the risky of 49ers 53-man cutdown day. We're just in the midst right now of covering this roster building process. This is far from a finished product. I've called it the rough draft. Today, the 49ers, by rule, by 1 o'clock Pacific time, had to cut from 90 to 53 players. There's a lot of cool strategy going on right now because the whole league is on the prowl right now, trying to grab players who've been waived or released. And the 49ers, they're looking elsewhere too, but they're also going to be trying to get a handful of their guys back. They had no choice but to waive or release over 30 players, right? They had to go from 90 to 53. So 37 players they had to waive or release unless they were doing some IR machinations, which they did execute. I'll get into those. But the risks happened in that space, in that 30 plus player space. Within about 18, 19 hours, the waiver wire will have processed, and the 49ers will be able to formally begin building their 16-man practice squad, which is a key extension of the 53-man roster. Ever since 2020, when they made it easier to call up players, you have to look at the practice squad as a very key part of the team, even on Sundays, even on game day. So I'm going to talk about what was good today. I'm going to talk about what was bad today, the adversity the 49ers had to overcome, and I'm going to talk about some of the risks that they had to take or they decided to take and how those risks might age over the course of the next several hours. So if you go to The Athletic right now, this is the 53-man roster analysis. One of the good parts of today for the 49ers, Talanoa Hufanga. He comes off the physically unable to perform list. That's big for the 49ers. That means that an all-pro safety is on track in his rehab. There was no reason to rush Talanoa Hufanga because they're getting good play from Jair Brown. They're getting good play from George Odom. They're getting good play from Malik Mustafa at safety. They've got Tracy Walker III, or they had him. They obviously released him. He may be back on the practice squad in case they need to continue slow playing Hufanga. But things are moving along at least quickly enough for him to come off of that PUP list and be eligible for week 1 of this season. Had he not come off of that list, he would have had to have been out for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. So Hufanga is one good thing for the 49ers. He's up there on the screen. Here's a bad thing. The Brandon Aiyuk hold-in makes for a massive inefficiency. And I could pop open the roster so we can look at this and have this all visualized. But the receiver room has 7 bodies right now on the 53-man roster. Here it is. I'm going to highlight it. There's a report that Tay Martin's going to sign with the 49ers practice squad. That obviously isn't official yet. I don't think that could happen until tomorrow, till guys clear waivers, but that's from Aaron Wilson. So I have Tay Martin listed over here just in case you're curious, but we're focused on these 7 guys. The receiver room is a little bit bigger than people thought it was going to be, but one of the reasons why it's bigger, maybe the primary reason that it's bigger, is that Brandon Aiyuk is taking up a spot, but he's not actually on the practice field for the 49ers, not actually on the game field for the 49ers. Now, maybe that changes before Monday, September 9th. That's the season opener against the New York Jets. Maybe it doesn't. But Brandon Aiyuk, as of right now, is taking up a spot without contributing on the field. And that is bad. That's a problem for the 49ers. That is related to this bad situation, the offensive tackle situation for San Francisco. As you can see, Trent Williams' name is not even on this 53-man roster because he's holding out. I do think that a holdout, though, is preferable to a hold-in for the 49ers because at least Williams is not taking up a valuable roster spot. As it stands, they only have 2 tackles on the team right now on the 53-man roster, Jalen Moore and Colton McKivitz. That being said, I think that they're going to at least partially rectify the situation tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe they manage to re-sign Trent Williams tomorrow. That will essentially fully rectify the situation whenever it happens. But when they add to the practice squad, they're going to add some guys that are able to play tackle. For the time being, the 49ers had to release players so that way they could fit everybody that they needed to that could have been exposed to waivers, and they didn't want to expose the waivers on this 53-man roster. So for now, only Moore and McKivitz. Obviously not a good tackle situation, so we'll list that as bad for the 49ers. However, there are other good things for San Francisco. Good. Darrell Luter Jr. and Tatum Bethune's emergence. Both of these guys made the 53-man roster after not making the initial 53-man roster last year. Bethune obviously was still at Florida State, so he couldn't have. Darrell Luter Jr. was a rookie, but he was on the PUP list for the 49ers, and he carried over to the PUP list into the regular season. Didn't make his debut until the back half of the year. Both of those guys earned their spot on the team, and it was not easy. If you can look here at the defense for San Francisco, first we can start with Tatum Bethune. He's one of 6 linebackers on this team. That is not including Dre Greenlaw. The 49ers did not carry every single young linebacker that was on the 90-man roster. One of the guys that got the axe was Jalen Graham. I think that they hope to bring Jalen Graham back into the fold tomorrow as part of the practice squad. But the truth of the matter is that Graham was a 7th-round pick from the 2023 draft, and he had been struggling a bit in coverage. And while Tatum Bethune hadn't been great in coverage, he was from the 2024 draft, and he was playing better against the run. But even if all things had been equal, I think the fact that Tatum Bethune was from this 2024 draft, so had a year more of team control under the 4-year rookie deal than Jalen Graham, that gave him the nod. That gives you an idea of how brutal the NFL is. It is a tough industry to compete in because they're always drafting a new class of guys trying to replace the class of guys in front of them. And a lot of people today were upset about the fact that the 49ers had to cut or decided to cut their 2 tight ends, the 3rd-round pick from the season before in Cam Latu and the 6th-round pick from the season before in Braden Willis. But let's be honest, it's good that the 49ers are running a true meritocracy at tight end. Those guys only had a year to prove themselves to try to make their second 53-man roster. Last year would have been the first 53-man roster for Cam Latu had he made it, because last year he went on injured reserve. But Braden Willis made it last year. But even though they only had a year of runway, the 49ers felt that they had better options behind those 2 guys at the tight end position, at least one better option, and that was Jake Tonjes. Jake Tonjes was on the practice squad last year, but he made the team over Braden Willis and Cam Latu this year. Now, this is not all that the 49ers are going to take at that tight end position. This is one of those rough draft of the roster situations. They're going to bring Eric Saubert back in all likelihood tomorrow. They had to run a maneuver to fit John Feliciano and Ambry Thomas on the roster so they could put them on injured reserve after the cut down. That way, both of those guys are eligible to return in case they need them. So the volunteer, I would assume, is Eric Saubert and maybe Rock Yassin, maybe somebody else, maybe one of the tackles, maybe Brandon Parker or Chris Hubbard also volunteered for the wink deal where they re-sign with the team tomorrow. But as you can see, it surprised some. Jake Tonjes, though, is on the team. It mildly surprised me that the 49ers were willing to move off of both Willis and Cam Latu, even though I thought that Jake Tonjes had been the steadier player over the course of training camp. But teams aren't often willing to just cut their losses in these situations. And it's called sunk cost fallacy if you don't cut your losses. 49ers, I think, have been really good at avoiding sunk cost fallacy. They realize that the draft is an imperfect crapshoot. People that are mad about a 3rd-round pick not working probably don't understand the numbers behind the 3rd round in the NFL draft or behind the NFL draft in general. But 3rd-round picks have a hit rate of about 20% in the league. The highest that you're going to see as far as hit rate goes in the draft is the 1st round. It's about 55%, maybe 60% in a better draft condition year. So it's a crapshoot no matter which way you look at it. The only round where it's more likely than not that you're going to find a hit is the 1st round. But the 3rd round where Cam Latu was drafted, especially late in the 3rd round, probably not going to find a hit in the 3rd round. In fact, it's tough because today we saw some drafted kickers get cut. The 49ers aren't cutting their kicker. They're happy with Jake Moody. But I would say that maybe you have a higher potential hit rate with somebody like a kicker or a punter in the 3rd or 4th round than you do with an actual player. But anyway, the tight end position, it wasn't about holding on to draft picks that obviously don't have high hit rates. And you know, guys like Cam Latu and guys like Braden Willis went in a part of the draft where the hit rate's not high. It was about making sure that the 49ers were able to keep the best players in the building. Now, they could still believe in the development of Cam Latu and the development of Braden Willis, but they didn't believe in it enough, or at least in their readiness at this very moment enough, to have those two guys take up a roster spot at this time. They'll see if they clear waivers, and if that happens, we will watch to see if they do re-sign Cam Latu and Braden Willis to the practice squad. But for the time being, they've got Tonjes on the team. They could try to bring back Logan Thomas, who was cut today, tomorrow. And they could also, if you're the 49ers, obviously, try to fortify the tight end room even further with an outside signing. They were trying to do that over the course of this offseason with Brock Wright from the Detroit Lions, but he was a restricted free agent and he re-signed instead on the 49ers offer, but with the Detroit Lions because they were able to match that 49ers offer. Somebody like Mason Pline, the rookie, I think he's going to go over here in the practice squad. So I think it's good the way the 49ers are managing the tight end room. They're not sticking too sentimentally to draft picks, even though they were a year ago. They're making sure that they get the best guys in there. Another bad thing for the 49ers is Trent Williams' reported contract stance. Trent Williams, I guess, according to Josina Anderson, she put it up here today. Read this. Trent Williams wants to be paid. Not just paid. He wants to be paid, like the very important piece that he is. Another league source also added this morning, San Francisco is between a real rock and a hard place because Trent is not playing around. Something may have to give unless you're allowing for big adjustments next season. So it's probably not going to be as simple as just guaranteeing some money for Trent Williams. I illustrated it here for you this morning. This is what's left of Trent Williams' contract. 3 years at $20.8 million this year, $23.4 million in 2025, $33.1 million in 2026. That adds up to 3 years, $77.3 million, or about $25.8 million per year. How does that compare to the top tackle contracts out there right now? Well, Tristan Wirfs is at $28.1 million per year. Penei Sewell is at $28 million per year. And Christian Darrisaw of the Vikings is at $26 million per year. That's all great, but Trent Williams' number is even weaker than those because there's no guaranteed money left. Also, Trent Williams is 36 years old. And if you look at how the money is distributed for the next 3 seasons under the current deal, the heaviest load comes in 2026. And if it's not guaranteed and he's going to be 38 in that season, well, then you would think that Trent Williams probably wants the bigger load of money to come sooner. So we're assuming here, and I think it's a fair assumption to make, that Trent Williams wants a heavier load of money coming earlier in the existing part of his contract. So he wants to rework the deal in that way. And he wants a significant chunk of it guaranteed. Now, just how much of it the 49ers will guarantee and how big of a load they can move earlier to the contract, that's what's at dispute right now. That's what this negotiation is all about. Still, if Trent Williams wants to get paid, and if he wants to be on the scale of these guys down here, Wirfs, Sewell, and Christian Darrisaw, probably Wirfs and Sewell, if he wants to be at the top because he is the best tackle in football, he's better than these players, it's going to cost the 49ers more money than they're paying Trent Williams right now. And they're in this delicate salary cap situation, having paid a lot for Nick Bosa last year, having to pay Brock Purdy next season, trying to figure something out, trying to thread the needle with Brandon Aiyuk, who may or may not be being unreasonable with his demands. That's a subject that we'll talk about in a little bit. But they're having to thread needles in multiple locations here, with Trent Williams being one of them. And the fact that Josina Anderson confirmed today that Trent Williams is looking to probably reset the market, well, geez, that's tough for the 49ers. They're going to have to break the bank and also find a way to fit the bank within their salary cap structure so that Brock Purdy is also taken care of without having to blow up the team next season. Either way, it's a challenge for the 49ers, so we're going to list that as bad. So I've listed a lot of good and bad. I've got another good one coming, but I also want to list a risky. Risky is waiving Jarrett Kingston and Drake Nugent. These are 2 young offensive linemen who had been looking good during the preseason. I'm sure the 49ers won't be happy about me talking about this right now while Nugent and Kingston are exposed to the waiver wire. And I'm sure other NFL teams are scouring the waiver wire right now, but I don't care. I'm going to talk about it anyway because I have to report what I saw at training camp and what I saw during the preseason. But Jarrett Kingston, he gave up only 2 pressures in 84 pass blocking snaps. And then there was Drake Nugent, who only gave up 1 pressure in 57 pass blocking snaps. Kingston played guard. He played a little bit of tackle too for the 49ers over the course of practice. I don't think he played any tackle during a game. And Drake Nugent is a center. Combined with Dominic Pooney, you have a trio here that I think has the potential to form the future of the 49ers offensive line. You've got guys that are really quick in the short shuttle. Jarrett Kingston ranked number 5 of all drafted offensive linemen. Dominic Pooney, who made the team, ranked number 3. And Drake Nugent wasn't all too far behind them, although he was more undersized than those other 2 guys. So he went off the board as an undrafted free agent. But if you look at the 49ers line right now, and I could show you the 49ers line right now, if we go back to our trusted roster spreadsheet, the line goes Jalen Moore at left tackle, obviously waiting on Trent Williams, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel at center, Dominic Pooney has earned that starting spot at right guard, and Colton McKivitz at right tackle. Banks is hurt currently, so is Feliciano, who's probably going to go to injured reserve. So Nick Zakelj has replaced Aaron Banks at that left guard position whenever Banks has been out. Jake Brendel's coming off of a down year. Aaron Banks is entering a contract year. He's not going to be under contract past this 2024 season. Dominic Pooney's already taken over the right guard spot. So with Brendel being somebody who needs to turn it around this year, you want to see an upward trajectory and not a downward trajectory from him. The 49ers invested some signings in centers this offseason. 2 undrafted guys in Bryson Mays, who was cut earlier this offseason, and then Drake Nugent. Nugent then played well in the preseason. I'm sure the 49ers would love to have him back on the practice squad. Then that left guard spot, you wonder, is that going to be something that Jarrett Kingston can take over? And the fact that Jarrett Kingston also played tackle in college, and he also played as a pass protecting tackle for Mike Leach at Washington State before he transferred to USC, that makes you think, is he, a potential candidate for a tackle spot in the future for the 49ers, or at least for a utility offensive lineman spot, a la Daniel Brunskill, who was so valuable to this football team? Well, either way, these guys have potential. And either way, the 49ers are going to be sweating it for the next several hours because both Nugent and Kingston have been exposed to waivers. If they're not claimed, the 49ers can bring them back to the practice squad. But if they are claimed, well, it will go the way of Ilm Manning last year, who impressed the 49ers during training camp, but couldn't quite crack the 53-man roster. So Ilm Manning headed to the Arizona Cardinals. They signed him away. 49ers ultimately got Ilm Manning back because the Cardinals couldn't keep him on their roster. But that wasn't until further down the line. And, not every single player is going to be a guy that you take a sigh of relief a year down the road and say, okay, it was fine. We could have afforded to lose him. There's a chance that Drake Nugent and Jarrett Kingston are both really good players. The 49ers misstep here. Well, I'm not saying they misstep. I'm saying that they took a risk. And it's a risk sometimes that you have to take when you look at the rest of the roster. You see that somebody like Nick Zakelj has progressed. You see somebody like Spencer Burford, who you feel since he started for you in the past would get snatched up by another team if you waived him. You look at all your receivers. You look down through your defensive package on the football team, and you say, and you have to balance a lot of things. You have to balance guys that you can release, who you can have wink-wink deals with to re-sign with the team. Probably Eric Saubert falls into that category. Maybe Rock Yassin falls into that category. Then you have to look at guys that are going to be exposed to waivers. Those are guys without 4 vested years in the NFL. And then you scout the rest of the league and you look to see what other teams might be interested in. And if you feel that other teams might poach other players, and then you look at Jarrett Kingston and Drake Nugent and you see what other teams are looking for, and you get the feeling that maybe those guys won't be poached, that's the risk that you take. But it's still a risk, and that's the 49ers strategy behind it. This is good. The 49ers seem to be they're in the midst of some savvy maneuvers as far as maximizing their roster efficiency. So this is where I explain some of those injury maneuverings that the 49ers are making. John Feliciano recently had knee surgery. So John Feliciano is not going to be available for about the first half of the season. That's what Kyle Shanahan said. Ambry Thomas recently broke his forearm, so he's also not going to be available for a large chunk of the season. However, John Feliciano was a very valuable lineman for the 49ers last year, and no matter what people say, Ambry Thomas is also a person you want to keep in the building. He may not be a great cornerback, but he's made some plays for the 49ers in the past, and B, you need as much depth as possible at the position. Somebody said Ambry Thomas is like Brian Allen. Said no, Ambry Thomas is not like Brian Allen, who gave up, 180 receiving yards over a half to the Miami Dolphins. Ambry Thomas is still a serviceable player out there. Again, he got knocked off of the playing time rotation by a lot of the good cornerbacks that the 49ers spruced their roster up with: Charvarius Ward, Isaac Yiadom, Deommodore Lenoir, and Renardo Green. But Ambry Thomas is not, we're not thinking of him in terms of somebody who's going to usurp Isaac Yiadom, Renardo Green, or even Darrell Luter Jr. for a spot if those guys are healthy. We're thinking of Ambry Thomas as somebody that's going to help the 49ers in case a lot of players get hurt, as has been the case in the past for them at the cornerback position. So you want to stay safe there. You want to stay insulated there. So you keep Ambry Thomas on the 53 for one day, so that way he can go to injured reserve tomorrow, but be eligible to come back if the 49ers need him. It is simply insurance for San Francisco. Now, when that happens, another roster spot will open up, and that's when the 49ers can reap the benefits of one of the backroom deals. If they have one with Rock Ya-Sin, they could bring him into the mix. If they have one from Eric Saubert, they can bring him back to the mix as well. So that's the way that San Francisco is approaching this. I think that they've got a couple savvy moves like that up their sleeve, and they're going to hope that some of the risks that they've taken also end up being savvy, so they can fill out this practice squad with 16 players that augment the 53-man roster. I think that I went through everything. I said good, an efficient receiver group with one exception. That led right into the bad. Brandon Aiyuk's hold-in made for a massive, massive inefficiency. So as soon as you can solve that hold-in, things get better. Now, this right here is my explanation of why a holdout is preferable to the 49ers over a hold-in, because Trent Williams is holding out. He's not part of this, so he's not taking up a roster spot. Because Brandon Aiyuk is holding in, this might be really upsetting Kyle Shanahan. He's taking up a roster spot, even though his presence on the field is the same as Trent Williams. He's a ghost on the field, right? So, we should take one of the driverless cars, and Casper could be either Brandon Aiyuk or Trent Williams. It's the guy that's not there for the 49ers at that particular position. Now, Trent Williams has literally disappeared from the roster right now. He's not on the 53, so that's okay for the 49ers. At least they don't have to dedicate a spot to him, but they have to dedicate a spot to Brandon Aiyuk because he's using this hold-in loophole that I'm sure is not making Kyle Shanahan all too happy. That being said, aside from that one spot, I think the 49ers are making really good, efficient use of their receiving spots. Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Chris Conley, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, and the seventh that they've added to this room today is Ronnie Bell. And, people up in arms, they carried Ronnie Bell on the roster. First off, you should show up to practice and actually watch what's happening before you make some sweeping judgment just because you don't like a player. I've never seen so many people decry a fellow human being getting great career news. Ronnie Bell got great career news. He worked his ass off. He made his way onto a good NFL roster. I think that's awesome for Ronnie Bell. I don't think the 49ers would want to do something that would hurt the team. I think they saw the tenacity. They saw the effort he put out there, and they see the versatility from somebody like Ronnie Bell. And he's going to have to continue fighting every single day for that practice, for that spot on the 49ers team. I don't know why fellow human beings would want to denigrate that, why they would be decrying that, why Ronnie Bell. And it's usually people who don't know what the hell's going on with the football team. So yes, he has shown enough to get on the team, but B, the 49ers have had to build an efficient receiver group, even with that one exception, the inefficient exception of Brandon Aiyuk still taking up that spot on the roster. And when I talk about efficiency at the group, I talk about adaptability and the ability to execute multiple different jobs. So that way your roster spot really means something. Jacob Cowing, I think, is in the driver's seat to be the 49ers punt returner. Ronnie Bell has also improved as a punt returner. I've watched every single practice over his time there, and it seems that he's fielding punts more cleanly now than he was before. Ricky Pearsall, well, he may be in the mix at punt returner, but you know what? I should probably shade Ricky Pearsall here in pink because he's still wearing that blue non-contact jersey. So you need insulation on top of this room because of the question mark surrounding Aiyuk, because of the question mark surrounding Pearsall. That's where Ronnie Bell helps fortify things for the 49ers. He can do a lot of stuff. He can play that receiver position. I think he's learned multiple positions, and he can also deliver on special teams, which is extremely, extremely important. Now, the 49ers did cut Danny Gray from that receiving room. I think the emergence of Jacob Cowing really put the writing on the wall for Danny Gray if it hadn't already been there before. Last season, Danny Gray was healthy, and Kyle Shanahan acknowledged so. And even though he was healthy, what the hell? Something started playing on my phone. That's crazy. Even though Ronnie Bell was healthy, Danny Gray was healthy. He did not receive an activation. And when he didn't receive an activation, I think that we noticed that the 49ers just weren't meshing well with Danny Gray. He got one final chance to try to make the football team this year, and he didn't make it. So third-round draft pick from the 2022 draft was waived today. Again, 20% hit rate. That is the hit rate on third-round picks in the NFL draft. So you can't act like the 49ers are unusual as a football team in seeing some draft picks not work out. They've actually seen a whole lot of draft picks work out over the years, and it's a crapshoot where you generally want to throw a lot of darts up against the wall and hope that X amount of darts hit. And I think that the 49ers, if you look at how many rookies made this football team, they saw a lot of darts hit the wall with this 2024 draft class. Green is a rookie. Ricky Pearsall is shaded here in pink because he's currently hurt, but we need to also shade Isaac Guerendo in green because he's a rookie. So you've got Guerendo making the team, Jacob Cowing making the team as a rookie, Dominic Pooney making the team as a rookie, Tatum Bethune making the team as a rookie, Renato Green making the team as a rookie, and Malik Mustafa making the team as a rookie. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rookies making the team for the 49ers. On a loaded roster like the one San Francisco has, I can't overstate the importance of that. I mean, the loaded roster with so many highly paid players, with the 49ers in between a rock and a hard place when it came to the salary cap, that's, they had to get those cost control deals on this 53-man. And they weren't going to let guys onto the 53-man just because they had a rookie contract. You had to earn your way there. So that's why it was so critical that they hit on this draft class. I mean, they cut guys on rookie contracts. They cut Cam Latu. They cut Braden Willis. You go back and you see 6 rookies make this football team on those deals that are financially palatable for the 49ers. I'm going to make my 53-man cut down spreadsheet a little bit later tonight and go over the salary cap impact of everything with you guys to see how this team is going to fit under the cap. And when I report back on that tomorrow, I'm sure that we're going to have a very interesting look at how the 49ers were able to financially surf the wave. And I know they still have a lot of big pieces to execute there on the Trent Williams front and the Brandon Aiyuk front, but everything here is connected. And seeing 6 rookies make the team, that's going to really help the 49ers in that regard. All right, so that's the good. That's the bad. That is the risky. We're going to wait to see as the 49ers hold their breath on Kingston and Nugent. And now we're going to open this up to questions on 49ers cut down day to wrap everything up. Pooney's got a new nickname, the Punisher, Rookie of the Year. He has made the team. He is going to be starting at that right guard position. Eric Gomes says, ask some good questions. Yes, please do that. Is week 1 in question if Trent is out? Like, you mean in question to lose to the Jets? I think the Jets are going to be a good team. I mean, they were already a really good defense, and If Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt this time, well, it's Aaron Rodgers on the other side. I don't care how old he is. You pair him with a good defense, they're going to be a dangerous team in week one. So, yeah, I mean, week one is danger zone even with Trent Williams. The 49ers definitely want Williams and Brandon Aiyuk back by then. I don't think they're large favorites in week one, and I wouldn't make them large favorites. Not going to be easy. Do teams begin building out their practice squad tomorrow? Well, technically, you could begin building it out now because vested veterans are free to re-sign wherever right now. But rookies or guys with less than 4 vested years, they have to clear waivers first before they re-sign. So, yes, the bulk of the practice squad is going to be built tomorrow. There will be protection adjustments. Linemen aren't one-on-one all game, every game. Yes, of course, the 49ers would adjust if Trent Williams wasn't there. But there's a reason why he's considered one of the best players in football and why he's demanding all this money and this contract adjustment. He's altering the deal. We all need to pray that he doesn't alter it any further. And the reason is that he's valuable. The reason is that there is inherent value in having a complete wrecking ball on the left side. You like to run that way with Christian McCaffrey that can take out multiple men, that just instills fear in guys. Guys are making business decisions to get out of Trent Williams' way. There's value in having that for the run game, and there's value in having that for the pass game so you can have one-on-one matchups. You don't have to shade help over the Trent Williams side. If you have one-on-one matchups on that side, it means guys like George Kittle, guys like Kyle Juszczyk, they're all much more likely to be deployed into pass patterns. So gives Brock Purdy yet another weapon to strain the defense. So it's a domino effect. So you can help out Jalen Moore as much as you want, but that's going to have a negative effect on your explosive arsenal in the other direction. It could also be rusty Aaron Banks without Trent Williams on the left side. I mean, these are all concerns. These are real concerns for the 49ers in week one. I should probably put the O-line back up on the screen. Moore, Banks, hurt right now. Feliciano's not going to be back by then. Brendel dealing with knee tendonitis. It was nice I didn't shade him in pink here because I think it's just a management issue at this point. But if he ever starts missing actual time, then he's going to be shaded in pink. And then you've got a disaster waiting to happen at the center position. You could see why the 49ers were trying to invest in young guys at center, but I don't know if they're exactly ready to take over right now. And there's Brendel, and there's Dominic Pooney and Colton McKivitz. So, and McKivitz has struggled over his time with the 49ers. So they're hoping that Dominic Pooney makes Colton McKivitz better at the right side of that offensive line. But there are leaks on the left side too. The best news the 49ers have is that Brock Purdy is such a good quarterback. And if Purdy is so good, then we've already seen it last year. He was able to overcome a below average line, but that was a below average line with Trent Williams at left tackle. A below average line without Trent Williams at left tackle, that's starting to become bottom barrel stuff in the NFL. That's becoming even harder for Purdy to overcome. So if there is a quarterback that can overcome it, it probably is Brock Purdy. But as we know, there's a limit to everything as far as O-line play goes. And Patrick Mahomes looked absolutely horrific in that Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when he was playing behind a bunch of backups. So, yes, Trent Williams has some leverage here against the 49ers. I love your name. Filthy Casual. It's kind of funny. Purdy lost 3 straight while Trent was hurt. Well, the 49ers lost 3 straight when Trent was hurt. Purdy didn't play bad during that stretch. I thought that the least efficient performance that Purdy had while Trent Williams was out last year was against Cleveland. But they also didn't have Deebo Samuel, and they also didn't have Christian McCaffrey at the end of that game. And Purdy still drove the 49ers into field goal range to win the game on the road in wet conditions against the number 1 defense in football, but Jake Moody missed the kick. So I think Purdy overcame the loss of Trent Williams in that game. The next week, I thought Brock Purdy was playing really well again, and then he got concussed late in the game. It wasn't until the concussion that Brock Purdy threw the 2 interceptions against Minnesota. So again, I think that Brock Purdy showed that he's got resilience and the ability to overcome. The very next week, he actually played well against Cincinnati, but the 49ers defense was totally gassed. And it was just a game of cat and mouse there. The 49ers were not catching the mouse. Cincinnati was getting away from them there because the defense just was not ready to deliver before the bye week. So this is an oversimplification. The 49ers, I think, are confident that Brock Purdy can overcome a lot of things. The data suggests that he's good enough to overcome a lot of things. But anybody with any common sense will go ahead and tell you that Trent Williams is important to a football team. And Trent Williams knows that, and that's why he wants more money out of the 49ers right now. Here's the big question with Brandon Aiyuk. Will he be actually willing to forfeit game checks? I don't think it'd be a smart play from Brandon Aiyuk. I don't know where he's at as far as that goes. I think that deadline pressure is really here now. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the regular season. Trent Williams has the leverage of being able to walk away. The guy's made $150 million. He owns a private jet. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer no matter what he does moving from here on out. So he could credibly threaten to retire and walk away from the deal. Can Brandon Aiyuk just sit there and in effect walk away from the deal? I mean, his highest salary up until this point has only been a couple million. I know he got a signing bonus, but he wasn't a high-end first-round pick. He went later in the first round. So he hadn't made huge money in the NFL. He hasn't cashed in like Trent Williams. So he's got a lot less threatening power in this situation. If Trent being gone makes the Niners offensive line worse, I don't know if they'd be the worst. Why aren't they trying to bolster? They are trying to bolster their offensive line. I mean, they've already added a rookie starter in Dominic Pooney. I think people don't understand how difficult it is to just use a random draft pick on a tackle and have that tackle be able to contribute at an NFL level. That's why, like, most good tackles are coming from high up in the draft in the first round, maybe the second, but even then, like I said, when you look at all draft picks, first rounders have about a 55% hit rate. You get down to the third round, it's down to like 20, 25%. It's not easy to hit in the draft, and it's especially tough to hit at tackle. So the 49ers, I mean, they did draft and add offensive linemen, and they're going to hope to be able to keep Jarrett Kingston and Drake Nugent in the building. We'll see if they can do that through the practice squad tomorrow. But Dominic Pooney, the third-round pick, has made the football team. That can make the right side a whole heck of a lot better. But you don't just wake up and find a replacement for Trent Williams somewhere in random free agency. You don't pull a guy off the street and say, okay, hey, this guy can give us a replacement for Trent Williams. And you also can't find it in the draft past a certain point. So they're trying to make their offensive line better. It's just not realistically that easy. And I think that probably the best path forward for the 49ers will be to relent here and realize that Trent Williams has a lot of leverage against them. And I think they do realize that, but they all, it's a tough spot. The 49ers have to be as cautious as possible, and they have to negotiate as well as possible because of the looming contract for Brock Purdy next season. Again, one of the big hopes too for the 49ers is that Dominic Pooney makes the right side better. And I think we already saw some clues that could happen during the course of the preseason. Dominic Pooney was playing at that right guard spot, and there were multiple instances where there was a heads-up play, a heads-up maneuver, where he could slide over and he could help out Colton McKivitz a little bit with a little shove or a little spin back. Offensive line play is about cohesion. It's about working well with the guy next to you. And I do think that we saw that from Dominic Pooney in the preseason next to Colton McKivitz. Last year, McKivitz was working alongside Spencer Burford and John Feliciano. Both of those guys registered as below average pass protectors. So if McKivitz was a below average pass protector himself, that was making things, even harder for him. So if Dominic Pooney is really able to take the pass protecting up to another level at right guard, that can help the guy right next to him in Colton McKivitz. You can't put Feliciano at center because he just had knee surgery. So John Feliciano's almost certainly going to be headed to injured reserve. He's only on there so that maybe later in the season they could insert him at that center position. Mike asks, who's the swing tackle? Right now, the 49ers have 0 backup tackles. I think that there's some level of confidence with this roster that Trent Williams and that situation will be resolved. And that once it is resolved, Jalen Moore can be the swing tackle. That being said, I think there's also a level of confidence that they could probably sign one of Brandon Parker or Chris Hubbard to the practice squad and have him ready to be activated for week 1, because both of those guys were in the system over the course of training camp. Now, San Francisco can also look outside the building on the waiver wire to try to bring in an offensive lineman here. But it's one of those situations where we have to wait until waivers settle. The 49ers are low down in the waiver selection order because they're runners up in the Super Bowl last year. So let's see what the 49ers do. They have pro advanced scouts who have their eyes on guys around the league. Obviously, there are veterans who are released too that the 49ers might try to negotiate with. And there's guys that they themselves released that they might be able to re-sign to their practice squad. I never look at this first roster and say, oh, this is the final product, because it very clearly isn't. You've got tight end 1 and tight end 2 and nothing beyond that. So obviously they're going to add more at the tight end position. You've got a couple guys who aren't going to be available for about half the season on the roster. That means they're just there temporarily to go to injured reserve. So you're going to replace them with a couple different players. You have some surprises like Elijah Mitchell today. Unfortunately, it sounded like he aggravated the hamstring pull with a more severe hamstring pull. So he's done for the season. So Patrick Taylor Jr. made the roster. I'll talk about more of that in this. I went around San Francisco a little bit earlier. Some of you might have seen this already, but those of you who didn't, you can enjoy this, enjoy some sights and sounds from the city. So that way I can get some water. Pressing questions about the 49ers 53-man roster cut down, at least the rough draft of it, answered right here, different spots of the city. I'm going to start with Ambry Thomas. Why is Ambry Thomas on the 53-man roster? Well, glad you asked. The 49ers, and really no team in the NFL right now, in the pass-happy NFL, is in good position to give up cornerback depth. And Ambry Thomas is cornerback depth for the 49ers, and he's not the worst cornerback depth that you can find. If you don't believe me, rewind back to 2020 when the 49ers had to play Brian Allen off the practice squad against the Dolphins. It was an absolute disaster. So even though the 49ers are very deep at that cornerback room this year, they still need to insulate themselves in case of injuries down the road. And Ambry Thomas currently has a broken forearm. So you carry him on the roster, but you have a wink-wink deal with a veteran who you wanted to carry anyway, who's going to re-sign that you cut. So that's Eric Saubert in all likelihood. The tight end, or Rock Yassin, or both of them. They needed to do this injury maneuver with a couple different players. Ambry Thomas is one of them. John Feliciano will likely be the other. So Ambry Thomas will be on injured reserve. The 49ers can bring him back if and when they need to. So they're simply maintaining their optionality by carrying Ambry Thomas in this way with no downside. All right, next question. Why'd the 49ers carry only 2 tight ends on their 53-man roster? Answer provided at Kezar Stadium, the original home of the San Francisco 49ers, here in the corner of Golden Gate Park. The 2 tight ends were, well, one was obvious, George Kittle. The second might surprise you a little bit more. It was Jake Tonjes, who was on the practice squad last year for the 49ers and just showed a really high floor over the course of camp and the preseason. Caught everything thrown his way and also executed at backup fullback, which is what the 49ers need from the tight end position with Ross Dwelley now gone. That's where Braden Willis did not perform for the 49ers against Vegas. He missed a big block early on. I think that might have been Braden Willis's final chance to really impress enough to grab one of those 4 tight end spots. They cut both Willis and Cam Latu, the draftees from the 2023 class, but they're not planning on only carrying 2 tight ends once this 53-man roster actually becomes functional. It's because you need to view this roster as a draft. 49ers are operating one of the roster maneuvers that I talked about with Ambry Thomas, very likely at the tight end position. Eric Saubert, who was number 2, the veteran throughout all of training camp, is very likely going to be re-signed tomorrow after the 49ers move Ambry Thomas and John Feliciano to injured reserve. So they've got a wink-wink deal there with Eric Saubert. Now, there's also a chance that the 49ers bring back Logan Thomas, and I think that's even likely. I just don't know if it's going to be 53-man roster or practice squad for Logan Thomas. But remember that Logan Thomas was not with this team for a couple weeks of training camp, but they already brought him back into the building a few days ago. And I would think that that means the 49ers have some plans for Logan Thomas on this football team. I do know that in the past, San Francisco has almost always carried 4 tight ends on the 53-man roster. Things could be changing this year. This could be more of a passing-oriented team, as I've talked about a lot over this course of training camp, and that would mean that maybe they do downsize the 3 tight ends. But if they stay at 4, Logan Thomas may be one of them, and somebody like Mason Pline will be signed to the practice squad if the 49ers can do it. Here at Kezar Stadium, by the way, they've got the plaque to Bob St. Clair. It's Bob St. Clair Field, Hall of Fame offensive lineman who played every single home game of his career in this stadium because he went to San Francisco Pauley High School. That's now a defunct high school. George Seifert also went there. You could see the roof of the gym above my shoulder. Then he went to USF. They played their home games here at Kezar, and then he was a member of the 49ers playing on this field right behind me in Golden Gate Park. Really cool stuff. That means that we could talk about the offensive line. Bob St. Clair played offensive tackle for San Francisco. So why are the 49ers carrying only 2 offensive tackles on this 53-man roster? There's Jalen Moore on the left side and Colton McKivitz on the right. They cut Chris Hubbard and Brandon Parker, the 2 veterans who are fighting for a swing tackle job. Well, the answer there is a little bit more complicated. For one, Trent Williams is still holding out. So he's on the reserve did not report list, means he doesn't count against the 53. Second part of that is I don't think that Hubbard nor Parker impressed the 49ers enough. If they're still available to tack onto the practice squad, yeah, maybe the 49ers keep one of those 2 guys. But they're banking on re-signing Trent Williams. They hope that's getting closer and they get that done. I think that's mandatory for this season to go the way the 49ers want it to go. And that obviously will bump Jalen Moore down 1 peg on that tackle pecking order. Beyond that, the 49ers offensive line is actually a really interesting case in the bigger picture because you've got 2 rookies who they cut who play on the interior line. In Jarrett Kingston, the guard, the 6th-round pick who played really well. And then you have the center, Drake Nugent, who also played really well in the preseason. We have to talk about practice squad poachings now and the potential ability for the 49ers to retain some of these players who they waived. We'll see if Kingston and Drake Nugent are able to clear waivers and rejoin the 49ers on the practice squad tomorrow. Next question, what's the deal with Elijah Mitchell? Well, he's biking uphill against injury issues. That's just a tough situation. Elijah Mitchell on season-ending injured reserve. We don't know the exact injury. He was out at practice on Monday, but he landed on season-ending IR during the roster cutdown on Tuesday. They did not designate him to return. So it was a hamstring injury that kept Mitchell out of the first portion of training camp. Then he returned. I don't know if the hamstring flared up again in a more serious fashion or if something else happened. But here's the thing about Elijah Mitchell, and he takes so much heat online. The casual fan needs to understand how brutal and how tough it is to play in the National Football League. And Elijah Mitchell played through 5 or 6 injuries his rookie season. It really was something that, I mean, it's a gladiatorial sport, and he took one for the team that rookie year. Because of that, I think that his body was just never right following that 2021 season. So much sacrificed when the 49ers needed it, when they're so short at running back in 2021 by Elijah Mitchell. You can never question his toughness. But you see it so often. Rookies need to be eased into the league. That's why the hits are harder, the speed is faster, the bruises are bigger in the National Football League. You just have to get your body to a different level of conditioning, a different level of callus to withstand some of that abuse. That's why it's so important that the 49ers handle this Ricky Pearsall shoulder situation well. Unfortunately for Elijah Mitchell, it was a 6th-round draft pick who was excelling in 2021. He was pressed into action. The 49ers were in a situation where they needed to win every single game. They needed a running back. They even moved Deebo Samuel to running back that year, and they were desperate. And Elijah Mitchell came through for them. But unfortunately, I think a lot of the bruises he took, a lot of the injuries he suffered that season have carried forward with him throughout the rest of his career. He's just been unable to stay healthy beyond that point. So Elijah Mitchell's season's done. His contract should toll into 2025. This was supposed to be the last year of his rookie deal, but because he won't play, he'll still be under contract with the 49ers through 2025 if he does decide to keep playing. Finally, the worst question that I'm getting, and I'll answer it here from Twin Peaks, is why did Ronnie Bell make the roster? Well, Ronnie Bell made the roster because he practiced his ass off. He didn't have the best start to training camp. He had some struggles. He was bobbling the football, even on some of his catches. But by the end of it, 7 catches on Monday, right before the cutdown, and a really tenacious punt return against the Raiders. By the end of it, he was the best option for the 49ers to fortify the receiving room. And if Brandon Aiyuk is part of the roster right now, but holding in, so that's an inefficient part of the roster. And if Ricky Pearsall's in a blue non-contact jersey and you want to make sure that you ease him into action so he's not overburdened the way that Elijah Mitchell was in 2021, well, you better bulk up that receiver room. You better take 7. Ronnie Bell was the 7th. Anyway, signing off from San Francisco. Take a look at the fog coming through the Golden Gate. So that is a look at the city with the Golden Gate enshrouded in fog. The fog coming in through the Golden Gate. Cool stuff in San Francisco today. All right, that's cool. I'm moving back to the 49ers Q&A. I think those were the most frequently asked questions. I hope that I answered some of them in that 10-minute video just going around San Francisco today. How to get out of the house. Helping my buddy Justin move into his new spot out in the inner Sunset, out on 14th Avenue. You know, normally August, a little foggy out there. Today, I mean, taking stuff out of the moving truck, doing some of the heavy lifting, kind of wished it was foggy, but definitely wasn't. 49ers Q&A is fired up again. Let's go. I guess the chat's going wild today. I haven't been reading the chat. It's all good, but I'm ready to answer your questions. Is Bosa somewhat hurt by Trent being out? The iron sharpens iron, not in effect. Yeah, I think the highest level of competition prepares your team most effectively. The 94 49ers, the last time they won the Super Bowl, they went after each other in training camp. It was out in Rockland. That was still back when I was in the Sacramento area. And it was highly, highly competitive. There were fights. You talk to Gary Plummer and Ken Norton Jr. William Floyd would fight a lot for the offensive side. Guys, and in some of the best 49ers training camps in years prior, Brandon Aiyuk and Fred Warner got in a fight. I'm not saying that you want to see fights on a daily basis, but you want to see a highly competitive football, which can often lead to some extracurricular activity. You got to walk the line because you don't want to cross the line. But when you don't have your best players out there, then you're less likely to be able to engage in the highest level of competition. And the highest level of competition is what helps guys improve. So, yeah, I do think that Nick Bosa loses a little bit when he has to go against Jalen Moore instead of Trent Williams. Who carries the boombox out of the tunnel if Trent doesn't return to action? Well, Trent or Debo are not carrying the boombox. They got the boombox guy for that. Not a player. Now, who leads the team out with the boombox guy? Well, Debo will certainly be one of those players doing it. Debo's coming off an awesome camp. He's looked really good. I don't know who else though. So it's a good question. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. How confident are the 49ers with Moore playing right tackle? I don't think they're very confident with that. I think they like Moore a lot more at left tackle. I believe that he's more comfortable at that left tackle position than he is at the right tackle position. All right, I wanted to hit 55 minutes. It's 9:20. We got a lot of good content in today, so you guys can go watch all that other stuff. 55 minutes was the goal. 55 minutes is where we're at, and I'll talk to everybody tomorrow.